So I worked with this client who ended up becoming a really good friend of mine. And there was a part of our work that, and this was when I was just personal training. I wasn't doing the somatic work that I'm doing now and some of the other things that I'm expressing. And there came a point where dude was really going through some challenges in his life. And he grew up, he was a D1 football player, like grew up just never backing down, never giving up, always pushing through, always persevering. And yet there was this moment in his experience where there was just things happening that he just could not control. And this idea of surrendering to him was so foreign that he was like, fuck that. Fuck that. I'm not going to surrender. And from his standpoint, he was looking at surrender as the same as quitting. And sometimes we can look at allowing and developing the skill of allowance in some ways as like, well, I'm just going to allow this shit to continue. I'm just going to allow these things to be. I'm just going to put up with it. And that's not necessarily the case of what I'm bringing today. There's this element of the skill of allowance. It is a skill, one that I am still learning in a lot of ways. But as somebody who's been so deeply on the other side, where because of pain and experiences in my childhood that resulted in a long-standing time of hyperfixating on control, controlling my environment, controlling what other people did, controlling everything from the minute details of like nutrition in an unhealthy way, right? Like being hyper obsessive over my food, to like cleanliness, to what, like, you know, I was not a good roommate because I would just be so fucking hyper controlling to live with, and God bless the men who I have lived with in the past. Thank you for your patience with me as I have been learning. In so many other areas of life, of just expressing control because it felt safe to me. You know, mind you, yeah, there were things in my upbringing that didn't feel too safe, and so as a result, you know, it's a natural pendulum swing. Yet, and I'm not to say like, you know, you have to go through a bad childhood. I mean, my childhood wasn't bad. There were some unfortunate things, but like, you know, we all have things that happen in our lives that are unfortunate, that change us and create us into some ways. But yet there's this element of allowance that would take me a really long time to figure out. And it came through this element of like, I didn't know what else to do other than just deeply surrender to what is happening. And as I've started to understand the more on, you know, that saying that the mind is a wonderful servant but a terrible master. A lot of people have heard that, and a lot of people understand that, but how does that actually play out? Like, how can we actually begin to understand that the body is the master, the mind is the servant, and there is something above it all? That comes from the skill of allowance. Allowance is the ability to allow sensations to run through you without immediately acting upon them. And sometimes not acting at all. Other times slowing the moment down enough for one to gain true clarity on the experience at hand. And yeah, you know, sometimes, there's a little ant crawling on my leg. Sometimes, you know, we need to take action quickly. And yet I have found that in those moments when we need to take action quickly, if we have a base foundation to rely upon, more often than not, those quick decisions will be done, you know, a little bit better than had we not had that base foundation. And that foundation, the practice that we utilize regularly, creates a foundation for us to stand on so that we can be with the present sensations of life, whether they are internal emotional states or external circumstances that are beyond our control. Yes, there is a degree to which things that we can control in our environment, but more often than not, they truly reach the limit of the tips of your fingers, if you know what I mean. And everything beyond that, there's a lot of things that we just can't control. And embracing in a practice that can root us down into something within ourselves and embrace this learning path of developing the skill of allowing. I keep looking over this way because this is actually the first time that I've made notes on what to talk about, so I'm not just ripping it from the hip, which isn't always a bad thing, but I feel like in the past it would just take me off course a little bit, and I want to be a little bit more direct. So we're trying this out. This is a new thing, having something to read from. I'm not used to that, so bear with me. But essentially, developing the skill of allowance is learning how to slow the moment down and connect with your body, and embracing compassion as much as possible for yourself. When we are able to slow the moment down by connecting with our breath, and this isn't necessarily doing breathing practices, breath work, doing that, it's really just as simple as one big inhale, one big exhale, done repeatedly with your attention being placed on that process. When you find yourself in meditation, meditation is not necessarily a tool to become this exalted state, even though that happens. Meditation's a tool to begin to understand how to navigate all of this that we have going on, the physical sensations and the ruminating mind. And when we engage in a mindfulness practice, it creates an opportunity for us to actually see the mind as it is, the servant, and the body as what it is, the master. In my viewpoint, I feel we navigate our lives with our bodies. Our mind may be making assumptions and casting projections and doing the things that the mind does, but when we walk into a room and we feel something off, or when we meet somebody and they really make us excited, that's a felt experience in the body. It's not something that we logically can think of until the moment is done or some time has passed from the initial introduction of the situation. Then the mind can come in and kind of recall and kind of think about like the qualities of that person and why you liked them, or maybe what was it, what were the certain themes and the things in the environment of the place that you walked into that you resonated with. But the initial introduction is this felt coherence of the body. Learning to connect with that is done through a deepening of mindfulness. Through mindfulness, the main anchor that is taught is the breath, because it is always present and available with us. And more often than not, when we breathe, you can either notice, are you breathing into your abdomen or are you breathing into your chest? One's not necessarily right or wrong, but what I've noticed is that those with aroused nervous systems or who just don't have a understanding of like how to breathe, it tends to be very shallow and in the chest. And when we learn to deepen the breath and put it down into the lower part of our abdomen, it changes the experience of how we breathe, and it changes the way that we relate with our breath. So taking something, there's a practice, here's a little tool for you. A practice that I have is called hourglass titration. This is something that I teach my clients to when we're first starting to engage in some kind of mindfulness, breath-based practice. And the process is, you imagine, right, like an hourglass. There's a lot of material, and when you flip an hourglass, it's really heavy up top, and it's slowly starting to pour down into the base. We're kind of treating ourselves like that, where there's a lot of material up top, and we're slowly starting to pour that sand, that awareness down into the base. How we do that is by titrating. By titration, we are kind of pendulum swinging from focusing on what's happening in the body to releasing that and just focusing on the breath and letting the mind kind of do whatever it wants to do. So how you'll do this is you'll set a timer You could do anywhere from 8 minutes to start off with, 5 minutes to start off with. It doesn't really matter, but I wouldn't do anything less than 5 minutes realistically if you're going to actually see some kind of benefit from the practice. But start off with a couple rounds of breathing. I have my clients do box breathing, about 10 rounds of box breathing before going into the actual practice itself. But if you don't have time for that, you can just start off with just taking some deep breaths. Kind of anchor yourself down for a moment into the space that you are in. Then begin with taking 3 breaths and focus on the body. And you can kind of imagine like an hourglass, that energy is coming down, the attention, the awareness, it's coming down into the body. And you're just noticing what's happening everywhere from basically like the throat down, right? After 3 breaths of focusing there, you swing to the other end. You still count and focus on the breathing, but now you just kind of release the attention from the body and you just let the mind do and go wherever it wants to go. If it wants to focus on the breath, that's cool. If it wants to go think something, fine. And then you just repeat back and forth for the remainder of your timer, whether that's 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, doesn't matter. I would recommend though, if you're new to it, start small. The smaller, the better, almost like offensively small. Like if 5 minutes sounds like a lot, then do 60 seconds. If 60 seconds sounds like way too easy, almost offensively easy, then that's where you start. Because the matter is we want consistency. Because developing the skill of allowance is a skill, and like any skill, we need regular practice. If you want to strengthen your body, you consistently show up on a program, on some kind of regimen, to the facility that you are training at. If you want to learn an instrument, you have a lesson with a teacher, and then you have material to practice with for a certain amount of time, and then you see that teacher again. And if you didn't practice, when you see your teacher, they're going to know. In this way, if you don't practice something to anchor you into your body, there's this saying, we do not rise to the occasion, but we fall to the level of our conditioning. I actually learned that quote from the client that I referenced with at the beginning. So shout out to him. I'm not going to say his name just for privacy's sake, but shout out to him. We do not rise to the occasion, but we fall to the level of our conditioning. So when we are in the wild, there is no set game day like you're in sport. Game day can happen when somebody cuts you off in traffic. Game day can happen when there's a really heavy conversation that needs to be had. Game day can happen when you just wake up and you're in a shitty fucking mood. Game day can happen in so many different ways in the real world. What matters is what we are doing throughout our day-to-day, so that when these opportunities arise, we have something to lean on, to work with when we are in the state of allowing. Yet I say that, and also paradoxically, to be in the state of allowance is to not do anything. And so there's a paradox with this, and most of this stuff is kind of paradoxical in some way. But to be in a state of allowing is to just simply be. Even when it feels like you are engulfed in fire and you're just so fucking angry and you don't know what to do with yourself and you just gotta fucking take a second, that's allowing. Some people, are better at this than others. It's taken me a fucking minute to learn. Still learning in a lot of ways. But when you have the practice, you train the skill, it then just becomes an automatic part of you. So that when you are in the state of allowance, when things are happening that are challenging, and also, real quickly, this can also be for things that are really good. When you have a really good moment come, and you're almost like, oh no, I don't want to let this go. Like you're in a relationship with somebody and you really love them, and you're afraid of losing them when, you're have a night out and like things are going really great, and you're like, oh fuck man, I don't want this night to end. Like, allow it. Just allow it to be what it is, and that's so much easier said than done, but it also is kind of that simple. Because when we're in the state of allowance, it is very yin, it is soft, it is flowing, it is yielding. And that's not to say that there are moments when you do need to take embodied action, but if you're taking action from a reactive, impulsive state, kind of depends. Sometimes it could be good, sometimes it could be shit, Sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit. Depends. More often than not, though, when we are reactive, we'll look back on our reactive moments and think, I could have done better. So when we have a heightened sense of allowance, that creates a greater capacity for us to navigate the internal felt experience and the external experience that we live in. Let me see here. So, yeah, these notes are kind of hard to navigate with, because as I'm looking at them, I'm kind of like, well, I don't want to like read off it and have these like sections, but there's some parts in there that I'm, wanting to really highlight. So essentially, the art of allowance, the skill of allowance, is a practice that we will do for the rest of our lives. There are always going to be increasing stakes. I don't have children right now, but I'm sure when I do, this video is going to be funny to look at, because there's going to be a lot of shit that I'm going to need to allow. I say that because my cousin has a 3, I think she's 4 this year, going to be 4, 3-year-old. She's my niece, and I love her so much, but, listening to his experience being a parent, it's like, wow, all right, So as we go through this, the challenges may rise, and that's good, because that means your capacity is growing. And then in other ways it's frustrating, but why this is important, because if we don't have something, then we're lost. We're wanders, like we're just like a wind. We're just fucking, there's nothing like holding us to our core, to our center. And paradoxically, again, we're not holding the center, we're just allowing it to be, but we have something that we can sit upon, like I am currently seated on this little camping chair. And embrace in the mindfulness, like if you have a prayer practice in your life, prayer and mindfulness work hand in hand. But prayer is the opposite side. Prayer is the yin element. It is the listening when we are engaged in the active pursuit of projecting out to what we pray to. So honor it as that, and just feel called to say that, because everybody has their own beliefs, but I feel like some people who are deeply like religious and have those affiliations sometimes negate the mindfulness practices that come from the East, and they work very beautifully together and often complement each other greatly. So that is all, my friends. Practice that skill, practice the titration technique. If you have a technique or something that you do that kind of allows you to be in this state of allowance, whether you're listening to this on Spotify or YouTube, please leave a comment. I would love to know what you do so that I'm able to learn as well, and other people. If you're on YouTube, comment, subscribe. On Spotify, I don't really know if there's like a subscribe thing. I know there's like a follow thing, but do something. And you can follow me at Time of Sages and everything else. If you want to do any coaching work, I have links for all of that in my bios for free sessions for the first 45 minutes. Initial meeting is free. After that, find an offering that works best for you. Either way, y'all, much love. Talk soon.